Chapter 1, in which the reader is introduced to a man of humanity. Late in the afternoon of a chilly day in February, two gentlemen were sitting alone over their wine in a well-furnished dining parlor in the town of P in Kentucky. There were no servants present, and the gentlemen with chairs closely approaching seemed to be discussing some subject with great earnestness. For convenience sake, we have said hitherto two gentlemen. One of the parties, however, when critically examined, did not seem, strictly speaking, to come under the species. He was a short, thick-set man with coarse, commonplace features, and that swaggering air of pretension which marks a low man who is trying to elbow his way upward in the world. He was much overdressed in a gaudy vest of many colors, a blue neckerchief, bed-dropped gaily with yellow spots, and arranged with a flaunting tie, quite in keeping with the general air of a man. His hands, large and coarse, were plentiful, beckoned with rings, and he wore a heavy gold watch chain with a bundle of seals of pretentious size, and with a great variety of colors attached to it, which in the ardor of the conversation he was in the habit of flourishing and jingling with evident satisfaction. His conversation was in free and easy defiance of Murray's grammar, and was garnished at convenient intervals with various profane expressions, which not even the desire to be graphic in our account shall induce us to transcribe. English Grammar, 1795, by Lindsley Murray, 1745 to 1826, the most authoritative American grammarian of his day. His companion, Mr. Shelby, had the appearance of a gentleman, and the arrangements of the house and the general air of the housekeeping indicated easy and even opulent circumstances. As we before stated, the two were in the midst of an earnest conversation. "That is to say, I should arrange the matter," said Mr. Shelby. "I can't make trade that way, I positively can't, Mr. Shelby," said the other, holding up a glass of wine between his eye and the light. "Why, the fact is, Haley Tom is an uncommon fellow. He's certainly worth that sum anywhere, steady, honest, capable, manages my whole family like a clock." "You mean honest as go," said Haley, helping himself to a glass of brandy. "No, I mean really, Tom is a good, steady, sensible, pious fellow. He got religion at a camp meeting 4 years ago, and I believe he really did get it. I've trusted him since then with everything I have, money, house, horses, and let him come and go around the country, and I always found him true and square in everything. Some folks don't believe there's a pious slave, Shelby," said Haley, with a candid flourish of his hand, "but I do. I had a fellow now, and this year last lie I took to Orleans. 'Twas as good as a meetin' now, really, to hear that critter pray, and he was quite gentle and quiet-like. He fetched me a good sum, too, for I bought him cheap of a man that was obliged to sell out, so I realized 600 on him. Yes, I consider religion a valuable thing in a slave when it's the genuine article and no mistake." "Well, Tom's got the real article, if ever a fellow had," rejoined the other. "Why, last fall I let him go to Cincinnati alone to do business for me and bring home $500. 'Tom,' I say to him, 'I trust you because I think you're a Christian. I know you wouldn't cheat.' Tom comes back, sure enough. I knew he would. Some low fellows, they say, said to him, 'Tom, why can't you make tracks for Canada?' Ah, Master trusted me, and I couldn't. They told me about it. I'm sorry to part with Tom, I must say. You ought to let him cover the whole balance of a debt, and you would, Haley, if you had any conscience." "Well, I've got just as much conscience as any man in business can afford to keep. Just a little, you know, to swear by, as it were," said the trader jocosely, "and then I'm ready to do anything in reason to oblige friends. But this year, you see, a little too hard on a fellow. A little too hard." The trader sighed contemplatively and poured out some more brandy. "Well then, Haley, how will you trade?" said Mr. Shelby after an uneasy interval of silence. "Well, have you a boy or a gal that you could throw in with Tom?" None that I could well spare. To tell the truth, it's only hard necessity makes me willing to sell at all. I don't like parting with any of my hands. That's a fact." Here the door opened and a small quadrant boy, between 4 and 5 years of age, entered the room. There was something in his appearance remarkably beautiful and engaging. His black hair, fine as floss silk, hung in glossy curls about his round dimpled face, while a pair of large dark eyes full of fire and softness looked out from beneath the rich long lashes as he peered curiously into the apartment. A gay robe of scarlet and yellow plaid, carefully made and neatly fitted, set off to the advantage the dark and rich style of his beauty, and a certain cosmic air of assurance blended with bashfulness showed that he had been not unused to being petted and noticed by his master. "Ah, Jim Crow," said Mr. Shelby, whistling and snapping a bunch of raisins towards him. "Pick that up, now!" The child scampered with all his little strength after the prize, while the master laughed. "Come here, Jim Crow," said he. The child came up, and the master patted the curly head and chuckled him under the chin. "Now, Jim, show this gentleman how you can dance and sing." The boy commenced one of those wild, grotesque songs common among the negroes, and a rich, clear voice accompanying his singing, with many comic evaluations of the hands, feet, the whole body, all in perfect time to the music. "Bravo!" said Haley, throwing him a quarter of an orange. "Now, Jim, walk like old Uncle Cujo when he has the rheumatism," said the master. Instantly the flexible limbs of a child assumed the appearance of deformity and distortion. As with his back humped up, his master's stick in his hand, he hopped up the room, and his childish face drawn into a doubtful pucker, and spitting from right to left in imitation of an old man. Both gentlemen laughed uproariously. "Now, Jim," said his master, "show us how old Elder Robbins leads a psalm." The boy drew his chubby face down to formidable length, and commenced toning a psalm tune through his nose, with impenetrable gravity. "Hurrah! Bravo! What a young hun!" said Haley. "That chap's a case, I promise. Tell you what," said he, suddenly clapping his hand on Mr. Shelby's shoulder. "Fling in that chap and I'll settle business, I will. Come now, if that ain't doing the thing up about the rightest." At the moment the door was pushed gently open, and a young quadroon woman, apparently about 25, entered the room. There needed only a glance from the child to her to identify her as its mother. There was the same rich, full, dark eye with its long lashes, the same ripples of silky black hair. The brown of her complexion gave way on the cheek of a perceptible flush, which deepened as she saw the gaze of a strange man fixed upon her in bold and undistinguished admiration. Her dress was of the neatest possible fit, and set off to advantage her finely molded shape. A delicately formed hand and a trim foot and ankle were items of appearance that did not escape the quick eye of a trader, well used to run at a glance the points of a fine female article. "Well, Eliza," said her master as she stopped and looked hesitantly at him, "I was looking for Harry, please, sir," and the boy bounced towards her, showing his spoils, which he gathered in the skirt of his robe. "Well, take him away, then," said Mr. Shelby, and hastily she withdrew, carrying the child on her arm. "By Jupiter," said the trader, turning on him in admiration, "there's an article now. You might make your fortune on that gal in New Orleans any day. I've seen over 1,000 in my day paid down for gals not a bit handsomer." "I don't want to make my fortune on her," said Mr. Shelby, dryly, and seeking to turn the conversation. He uncorked a bottle of fresh wine and asked his companion's opinion of it. "Capital, sir, first chop," said the trader. Then turning and slapping his hands familiar on Shelby's shoulder, he added, "Come, how will you trade about the gal? What shall I say for her? What'll you take?" Mr. Haley, she's not going to be sold, said Shelby. My wife would not part with her for her weight in gold. Ah, woman. I always say such things, 'cause they hain't no sort of calculation. Just show 'em how many watches, feathers, and trinkets one's weight in gold would buy, and that alters the case. I tell you, Haley, this must not be spoken of. I say no, and I mean no, said Shelby decidedly. Well, you'll let me have a boy, though, said the trader. You must own I've come down pretty handsomely for him. What on earth can you want with a child, said Shelby. Well, I've got a friend that's going into this year branch of the business, wants to buy up handsome boys to raise for the market. Fancy articles entirely sell for waiters and so on to rich uns that can pay for handsome uns. It sets off one of your great places, a real handsome boy, to open door and wait and tend. They fetch a good sum, and this little devil is such a comical musical concern. He's just the article. I would rather not sell him, said Mr. Shelby thoughtfully. The fact is, sir, I'm a humane man, and I hate to take the boy from his mother, sir. Oh, you do? Yes, something of that nature, I understand perfectly. It is mightily pleasant getting on with women sometimes. I always hates these year screaming times. They're mighty unpleasant. But as I manage business, I generally avoid 'em, sir. Now what if you get the girl off for a day or a week or so, and the thing's done quietly, all over before she comes home? Your wife might get her some earrings, or a new gown, or some such truck to make up with her. I'm afraid not. Lord bless ye, yes. These critters are like white folks, you know. They get over things. Only manage right. Now they say, said Haley, assuming a candid and confidential air, that this kind of trade is hardening to the feelings, but I never found it so. Fact is, I never could do things up the way some fellers manage the business. I've seen 'em as would pull a woman's child out of her arms and set 'em up and sell, and she's screeching like mad all the time. Very bad policy damages the article, makes 'em quite unfit for service sometimes. I knew a real handsome gal once in Orleans, and was entirely ruined by this sort of handlin'. The fellow that was trading for her didn't want her baby, and she was one of a real high sort, with her blood was up. I tell you, she squeezed up her child in her arms, and talked and went on a real awful. It kind of made my blood run cold to think on it. And when they carried off the child and locked her up, she just went raveling mad and died in a week. Clear way, sir, $1,000 just for wasn't of management. There's where it is. It's always best to do the humane thing, sir. That's been my experience. And the trader leaned back in his chair and folded his arms, and an air of virtuous decision apparently considered himself a second Wilberforce. The subject appeared to interest the gentleman deeply, for while Mr. Shelby was thoughtfully peeling an orange, Haley broke out afresh in becoming difference, but as actually driven by the force of truth to say a few more words. It don't look well now for a feller to be praising himself, but I say it just because it's the truth. I believe I'm reckoned to bring in about the finest droves of slaves that is brought in, at least, have been told so. If I have once, I reckon I have 100 times, all in good case, fat and likely, and I lose as few time as any man in the business. And I lays it all to my management, sir, and humanity. Sir, I may say, in a great pillar of my management. Mr. Shelby did not know what to say, and he said, Indeed. Now, I've been laughing at my notions, sir, and I've been talked to. They ain't popular and they ain't common, but I stuck to 'em. Sir, I've stuck to 'em and realized well on 'em. Yes, sir, they have paid their passages. I may say that the trader laughed at this joke. There was something so piquant and original in these elucidations of humanity that Mr. Shelby could not help laughing in company. Perhaps you laugh too, dear reader, but you know humanity comes out in a variety of strange forms nowadays, and that there is no one end up to the odd thing that humane people will say and do. Mr. Shelby's laugh encouraged the trader to proceed. It's strange now, but I never could beat this into people's heads. Now there was Tom Locker, my old partner down in Natchez, and he was a clever fellow. Tom was only the very devil of slaves. On principle it was, you see, for a better-hearted fellow never broke bread. It was his system, sir. I used to talk to Tom. Why, Tom, I used to say, when your gals take on and cry, what the use of cracking on 'em over the head and knocking on 'em around? It is ridiculous, says I, and don't do no sort of good. Why, I don't see no harm in their crying, says I. It's natural, says I. And if nature can't blow off one way, it will another. Besides, Tom says it just spiles your gals. They get sickly and down in the mouth. Sometimes they get ugly. Particular yellow gals do, and it's the devil and all we gettin' on 'em broken 'em now. Now, says I, why can't you kind o' coax 'em up and speak 'em fair? Depend on it, Tom, a little humanity thrown in along goes a heap further than all your jawin' and crackin', and it pays better, says I, depend on it. But Tom couldn't get the hang of it, and he spiled so many for me that I had to break up with him, though he was a good-hearted fellow and as fair and as a business hand as his goin'. And do you find your ways of managing do the business better than Tom? Said Mr. Shelby. Well, yes, sir, I may say so. You see, when I anyways can, I take a little care about the unpleasant parts, like sellin' young uns and that. Get the gals out of the way, out of sight, out of mind, you know. And when it's clean done and can't be helped, they naturally get used to it. 'Tain't, you know, as if you was white folks that's brought up in a way of expectin' to keep their children and wives and all that. Slaves, you know, that's fetched up properly, ha'n't no kind of expectations of no kind, so all these things come easier. I'm afraid mine are not properly brought up then, said Mr. Shelby. Suppose not. You Kentucky folks spile your slaves. You mean well by 'em, and can't no real kindness at her all. Now a slave, you see, what's got to be hacked and tumbled round the world and sold to Tom and Dick and the Lord knows who. 'Tain't no kindness to be given on his notions and expectations and bring on 'em up too well, for the rough and tumble comes all the harder on 'em later. Now I venture to say your slaves would be quite chop-fallen in places where some of your plantation slaves would be singing and whooping like all possessed. Every man, you know, Mr. Shelby, naturally thinks well of his own ways. I think I treat slaves just about as well as it's ever worth while to treat 'em. It is a happy thing to be satisfied, said Mr. Shelby with a slight shrug, and some perceptible feelings of a disagreeable nature. Well, said Haley, after they had both silently picked their nuts for a season, what do you say? I'll think the matter over and talk with my wife, said Mr. Shelby. Meantime, Haley, if you want the matter carried out in quite the way you speak of, you'd best not let your business in the neighborhood be known. It'll get out among my boys, and it will not be a particularly quiet business getting away any of my fellows. If they know it, I'll promise you. Oh, certainly, by all means, Mum. Of course, but I'll tell you, I'm in a devil of a hurry, and shall want to know as soon as possible what I may depend on, said he, rising and putting on his overcoat. We'll call up this evening between 6 and 7, and you shall have my answer, said Mr. Shelby, and the trader bowed himself out of the apartment. I'd like to have been able to kick the fellow down the steps, said he to himself as he saw the door fairly closed, with his impudent assurance, but he knows how much he has me at advantage. If anybody had ever said to me I should sell Tom down south to one of those rascally traders, I should have said, is thy servant and dog, that he should do this thing, and now it must come for aught I see, and Elijah's child too. I know that I shall have some fuss with wife about that, and of the matter about Tom too. So much for being in debt. The fellow sees his advantage and means to push it. Perhaps the mildest form of the system of slavery is to be seen in the state of Kentucky. The general prevalence of agriculture pursuits of a quiet and gradual nature, not requiring those periodic seasons of hurry and pressure that are called for in the business of the more southern districts, makes the task of a Negro a more healthful and reasonable one, while the master content with a more gradual style of acquisition has not those temptations to heartaches which always overcome frail humanity nature when the prospect of sudden and rapid gain is weighed in a balance, with no heavier counterpoise than the interest of the helpless and the unprotected. Whoever visits some estates here and witnesses the good-humored indulgence of some masters and mistress, and the affectionate loyalty of some slaves, might be tempted to dream of the oft-fabled poetic legend of a patriarchal institution. And all that, but over and above the scene, there broods a portentous shadow, the shadow of law. So long as the law considers all things human beings, and beating hearts and living affections, only as so many things belonging to a master, so long as the failure of misfortune, or impudence, or death of the kindest owner, may cause him any day to exchange a life of kind protection and indulgence for one of hopeless misery and toil, so long it is impossible to make anything beautiful or desirable in the best regulated administration of slavery. Mr. Shelby was a fair average kind of man, good-natured and kindly, and disposed to easy indulgence of those around him, and there had never been a lack of anything which might contribute to the physical comfort of the negroes on his estate. He had, however, speculated largely and quite loosely, had involved himself deeply in his notes to a large amount that had come into the hands of Haley, and this small piece of information is the key to the preceding conversation. Now it had so happened that in approaching the door, Elijah had caught enough of a conversation to know that a trader was making offers to her master for somebody. She would gladly have stopped at the door to listen as she came out, but the mistress just been calling. She was obliged to hasten away. Still she thought she heard the trader make an offer for her boy. Could she be mistaken? Her heart swelled and throbbed, and she involuntarily strained him so tight that the little fellow looked up in her face in astonishment. "Elijah, girl, what ails you today?" said her mistress, when Elijah had upset the wash-pitcher, knocked down the workstand, and finally was abstractedly offering her mistress a long nightgown in place of the silk dress she had ordered her to bring down from the wardrobe. Elijah started. "Oh, mistress," she said, raising her eyes. Bursting into tears, she sat down in a chair and began sobbing. "Why, Elijah, child, what ails you?" said her mistress. "Oh, Mrs., said Elijah. "There's been a trader talking with master in the parlor. I heard him." "Well, silly child, suppose there was. Oh, missus, do you suppose master would sell my Harry?" And the poor creature threw herself into a chair and sobbed convulsively. "Sell him? No, you foolish girl. You know your master never deals with those southern traders, and never means to sell any of his servants as long as they behave well. Why, you silly child, why do you think you would want to buy your Harry? Do you think all the world would set on him as you are, you goosey? Come, cheer up and hook my dress. There now, put my back hair up in the pretty braid you learnt the other day, and don't go listening at doors any more." "Well, but, missus, you never would give consent to nonsense, child. To be sure I wouldn't. What do you talk so for? I would as soon have one of my own children sold. But really, Elijah, you're getting altogether too proud of that little fellow. A man can't put his nose into the door, but you think he must be coming to buy him?" Reassured by her mistress' confident tone, Elijah proceeded nimbly and adroitly with her toilet, laughing at her own fears as she proceeded. Miss Shelby was a woman of a high class, both intellectually and morally. To that natural magnanimity and generosity of mind which one often marks as characteristics of the women of Kentucky, she added high moral and religious sensibility and principle, carried out with great energy and ability into practical results. Her husband, who made no professions to any particular religious character, nevertheless reverenced and respected the consistency of hers, and stood perhaps a little in awe of her opinion. Certain it was that he gave her unlimited scope in all her benevolent efforts to the comfort, instruction, and improvement of her servants, though he never took any decided part in them himself. In fact, if not exactly a believer in the doctrine of the efficiency of extra good works of saints, he really seemed somehow or other to fancy that his wife had piety and benevolence enough for two to indulge a shadowy expectation of getting into heaven through her superabundance of qualities to which he made no particular pretension. The heaviest load on his mind after his conversation with the trader lay in the foreseen necessity of breaking into his wife. The arrangement contemplated meeting the inopportunities and opposition which he should have reason to encounter. Miss Shelby, being entirely ignorant to her husband's embarrassments, and knowing only the general kindliness of his temper, had been quite sincere in the entire incredulity in which she had met Elijah's suspicions. In fact, she dismissed the matter from her mind without a second thought, and being occupied in preparations for an evening visit, it passed out of her thoughts entirely.